In this episode, I would like to discuss about the principal differences between the ordinary partnership firm and the limited liability partnership or LLP. We know that there are various similarities and dissimilarities between the ordinary partnership firm as formed under the Indian Partnership Act 1932 and the limited liability partnership as formed under the Limited Liability Partnership Act 2008. So, today's topic of discussion is what is the basic differences between the ordinary partnership firm and the limited liability partnership or LLP. The first point of distinction between the ordinary partnership firm as formed under the Indian Partnership Act 1932 and LLP, the Limited Liability Partnership Act 2008 is this, that every partnership firm that is formed under the old act, that is the Partnership Act 1932, it is not considered as a person in the eye of law, whereas the LLP as it is formed under the LLP Act or the Limited Liability Partnership Act 2008, it is considered as a person in the eye of law, because we know that there are two types of person. One is the natural person, like we the human being who can enter into a contract by our individual capacity, we can sue a person, we can be sued by other person. So, similarly ordinary partnership firm is not considered as a person, because we know that by virtue of the section 4 of the Indian Partnership Act, that partnership is the manifestation of a group of persons who are individually known as partner and collectively the firm, and the firm is having no separate existence, which is only having the existence of the particular persons and who are actually carrying on the business for the purpose of gain. So, the partnership firm is ultimately represented by a group of persons who are individually denoted as the partner and collectively the firm. But in case of LLP, LLP is a separate person. We are the human being like natural person, as I have said, but in case of LLP, it is not certainly a natural person, but it is an artificial or legal or juristic person. So, that is why LLP by its own capacity can enter into a contract, it can sue, it can be sued upon. So, LLP is considered as legal or artificial or juristic person in the eye of law. And second difference is that in case of ordinary partnership firm, registration is not mandatory. That means without registration an ordinary partnership firm can run the business. This is not unlawful. Whereas in case of the LLP, registration is compulsory. That means incorporation is mandatory. It is stated in portions of the LLP Act 2008, incorporation is the mandatory provision of the law. So, without incorporation, LLP cannot run the business. So, when the LLP is incorporated, that means the process of registration is complete, it is considered as a body corporate. So, this is the third difference. That means in case of the ordinary partnership firm, registration is not mandatory, and even if it is registered ordinary partnership, even after the registration, it is not considered as a body corporate, because even after registration in case of ordinary partnership firm, it cannot be considered as a person in the eye of law. It is merely, even after the registration, is manifestation of a group of persons. Whereas in case of LLP, after incorporation, it is having another identity, that it is denoted as a body corporate. And in case of ordinary partnership firm, that means the fourth point of distinction, at least two partners are required for commencement of the business. Two persons as partner can form the ordinary partnership firm, whereas in case of formation of the LLP, there also at least two LLP partners are required, and not only that, in addition to that, there are requirement of two designated partners, and one of whom will be resident of India. And not only that, the designated partners must have to obtain the DPIN number from the central government. They have to apply for the DPIN number, that means designated partner identification number. DPIN or designated partner identification number is to be obtained upon application by the designated partner before the central government. Central government will grant this DPIN number, without which they cannot act as designated partner, and one of whom will be positively the resident of India. Resident of India means he has stayed in India during the last financial year for at least 182 days. That means the year commencing from 1st April of the previous financial year and ends at the 31st March of the next year. So, that means during this financial year he must stay in India at least for 182 days. So, this requirement is mandatory, because without registration or incorporation ordinary partnership can run, but in case of LLP, if it is running without incorporation, it is unlawful and penalty will be imposed. So, let us have a look that the means principal conceptual differences between LLP and partnership firm. So, here partnership firm and LLP. So, in case of partnership firm, as I have stated, that it is not a person in the eye of law, whereas LLP is considered as a person, and registration is not compulsory in case of the ordinary partnership firm, who can run even without any registration. Whereas in case of LLP, registration, that means known as incorporation, is compulsory, mandatory provision of the law. Next, even after registration of the partnership firm, it is not a body corporate, it is merely any means one partnership firm only, not a body corporate. But in case of LLP, it is a body corporate after registration or incorporation. And minimum 2 partners are sufficient to run the business. In case of LLP, at least 2 partners and 2 designated partners, and one of whom is resident of India, as I have stated. There are other principles, points of difference between these two. I am discussing one after another. Essential point of distinction between ordinary partnership firm and LLP is this: in case of formation of the ordinary partnership firm, partnership agreement is required, but it can be made either orally or in written form, since in the Partnership Act 1932 it is not specifically claimed that such agreement must be in written form. So, that means option is there. So, partners are at liberty to form the partnership firm by way of making the partnership agreement either orally or in written form. Both are possible, but whereas in case of the LLP concern, incorporation is mandatory provision of the law. That means for incorporation, without written agreement, without written LLP agreement, it is absurd. No question of incorporation arises unless it is in the written form. So, that is why in case of formation of LLP, written LLP agreement is mandatory provision of the law. Now, next point is, in case of ordinary partnership firm, there is no question of perpetual succession. That means perpetual succession means the property stands in the name of the partnership firm permanently. In case of LLP, there is the concept of perpetual succession, means whatever property stands in the name of the LLP, that is of the LLP, and it will continue long thereafter, because LLP is a separate person, it is having a corporate existence, it is considered after the incorporation a body corporate. So, that is why everything stands in the name of the LLP. Partners assets liability, those are distinct, and LLP's assets is of the LLP. But in case of the partnership firm, it is the manifestation of a group of persons who are individually called the partner and collectively the firm. So, partnership firm has no separate existence apart from the existence of the partners, because it is not a body corporate like LLP. But the partners have invested the money, but ultimately it will come back in the hands of the partners at the end. So, that is why in case of LLP, its assets, everything is demarcated and it has the perpetual succession, means permanently it is belonging to that of the LLP. And next is in case of the ordinary partnership business, the partners are jointly and severally liable. So, joint and several liability concept, that means if there is any fault on the part of any partner, the other partner will suffer also. If there is any market debts stands in the name of the ordinary partnership firm, the partners are jointly and severally liable to satisfy the demand of the creditors. And in case a partner has paid off his respective amount, but still the credit is not secured, in that case the other partner's liability will come upon him. That means they are joint and severally liable. So, one partner's liability may come in the shoulder, on the shoulder of the other partner, but in case of the LLP concern, each LLP partner's liability is restricted, limited. One LLP partner cannot be held responsible for the fault of the other LLP partner, distinct liability. And moreover, in case of the ordinary partnership firm, partners liability is unlimited liability, partners are liable unlimited manner, whereas in case of the LLP, partners liability is limited liability. That means their liability is to the extent of their shares they hold in the LLP concern. So, in case of the ordinary partnership firm, partners liability is unlimited, whereas in case of the limited liability partnership, their liability is limited, and that is the main object of the act and main advantage of the act. So, let us have a look that so agreement in case of the partnership firm can be made either orally or in written form, whereas in case of LLP, agreement can be made only in the written form exclusively, and not having perpetual succession, but in case of LLP it is having the perpetual succession, permanent in nature. And seventh is partners are jointly and severally liable, one is responsible for the fault of the other, as I have discussed. And in case of LLP, individual liability of LLP partner, one is not liable for the other, respective individual liability, and unlimited liability of the partners, whereas in case of the LLP, by name it is clear that limited liability partners, that means their liability is limited. So, finally, I would like to conclude this topic by saying that the Partnership Act 1932, that means the Indian Partnership Act 1932 will not be applied in case of the limited liability partnership firm. The limited liability partnership will be governed exclusively by the Limited Liability Partnership Act 2008. But if there is any existing partnership firm, they can apply for getting incorporation under the Limited Liability Partnership Act. That means the existing partnership firm, they can be converted into LLP. So, conversion is allowed by virtue of the Limited Liability Partnership Act, that any existing partnership firm or any other concern can apply and thereby they can be converted. So, apart from these distinctions, there are also similarities between the ordinary partnership firm and the limited liability partnership firm, but these distinctions are very much prominent in persons of the Limited Liability Partnership Act and the Indian Partnership Act 1932.